Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets. Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets. All the fans are true to the orange and blue, so hurry up and come on down, 'cause we got ourselves a ball club, the Mets of New York.
How is everybody doing today on this breaking news story of the day? Besides the interesting football start of the season, the New York Mets have signed David Stearns, which is highly anticipated. Everybody seemed like they knew what was going on and that David Stearns was always going to be the president of baseball operations for the New York Mets, and now it has been confirmed, according to Jeff Passan, the New York Mets are hiring David Stearns as president of baseball operations. Sources familiar with the situation tells ESPN a monumental addition to the organization. Stearns, 38 years old, will take over officially once the regular season is over. The new era of the Mets has begun. Yes, yes, yes. We all knew this was going to happen. Everybody talked about it. It was the worst secret in Major League Baseball. I've said it from the very beginning. I thought that David Stearns, Steve Cohen, has had conversations for months, if not probably ever since he took ownership over. They've been talks. We do know that August 1st, in David Stearns' contract, that we found out that he's allowed to speak to other teams about positions, and we knew about two teams that were talking to David Stearns, which was the Houston Astros and the New York Mets. I always thought that it was basically a done deal. It just had to, sign on the dotted lines, cross the T's, dot the I's, and all that fun stuff. So that is something that we actually see is reality now. David Stearns is president of baseball operations. That is the breaking news of the day, guys. And listen up, guys. This is not being excited for a terrible Mets season of 2023. We know it started from the pitching being a disaster early on, from the offense becoming a no-show in the early months of June into July, and it just was a trickle-down effect until the deadline, when the Mets basically retooled, stocked their farm system, and set themselves up for David Stearns to take over with one of the best farm systems in baseball, with a decision in Pete Alonso that is going to come to a head very, very quickly once the season is over, because that's going to be one of the main topics. And we all know what needs to be done for the rotation and the bullpen. That's going to be the story, and that is going to be on David Stearns, because we all know Billy Eppler will be serving David Stearns coffee and getting exactly what he wants when he wants when it comes to Billy Eppler being a part of this organization and basically being David Stearns' cupbearer as this organization moves forward with David Stearns. According to another report, I believe it's Mark Feinstein and I believe Andy Martino, a 5-year deal is what David Stearns is getting for president of baseball operations. So that is something that you also have to look at as well. A 5-year deal, right? So 5 years can mean a lot of things, right? Billy Eppler, and this is why another reason why where people don't understand why the Mets would make trades at the deadline, knowing that Billy Eppler won't be the one of the guys or the main guy making decisions after this season. Don't think for a second that David Stearns didn't have some say in the organization moves at the deadline. I truly believe that. Because there's no way a deal from August 1st until September 12th that a deal got done that quickly. There has to be a lot more going into it. And that's why I believe that they were talking for a while. And I do believe Billy Eppler or Steve Cohen or somebody within the organization were talking to David Stearns prior to the deadline of what they should do. And David Stearns, yes, he hasn't won a championship. He's done a lot with a little in Milwaukee, but it is to show that a lot of people around baseball, and listen, when the Houston Astros are trying to steal David Stearns away from the Mets, you know this guy is a big name in baseball and teams want him. And the Houston Astros have been a very good organization. Yes, the cheating scandal, but they know how to draft. They know how to develop players. And when they're looking to go after David Stearns themselves, you know the Mets have made a good deal here. Again, can it blow up in our faces? Absolutely. Can David Stearns be a disaster now that he has money and not just trying to, work around a limited budget? Yeah, of course, it can be a disaster. We all know that. But one thing we do know is that David Stearns is one of the sought-after executives around baseball. Everybody, not just the Mets, but around baseball have talked about David Stearns being a really good executive, knows what he's doing, knows how to work with no budget, and everybody presumes that he can work with a budget. And that's something that I think the Mets were lacking. And I think the knowledge of David Stearns and and that's why they also fired all those scouts in the minors and directors of developmental directors and all that stuff. Basically, the rest of the Wilpon scouts and developmental people in the minor league system, it gives David Stearns the guys that he wants. And no money will be spared on that. The Mets can steal any scout, any director of developmental coaching, any type of coach, any type of executive, anybody they want to help develop the farm, they can probably pry away from any organization because of the money that Steve Cohen has. And that is something that David Stearns also has with them, with this organization now as well. He will get the right people in here. It's just a matter of, will it work? Well, we have to wait and see. That's going to take time. That's why he got a 5-year deal. It only makes sense. So what else do the Mets have to do when it comes to David Stearns? And when people ask, why is Billy Eppler going to be a part of this organization? 2 reasons. Number one, there's 2 guys the Mets are going to be going after that Billy Eppler is known to have relationships with, at least personally or in the aspect of location. And that is Japanese players, Ohtani and Yamamoto. Those guys. And that's why Billy Eppler is here. There is no mistake that Billy Eppler was the one that personally flew to Japan, met Shohei Ohtani, got to know his family, and had that personal connection with Shohei Ohtani. And Ohtani talked about it many times, why, out of all places, he signed with the Los Angeles Angels. Yes, it was the West Coast. Could have easily choose the Dodgers. Could have chose the Padres. Could have chose a lot of teams on the West Coast, the Giants, the Mariners, all those teams. Why did he choose the Los Angeles Angels? And everybody that spoke to Ohtani when he first signed with the Angels talked about Billy Eppler showing the most respect to him and his family and was one of the only executives to fly to Japan to meet him and his family. That is a big deal. That's a huge deal. And if people don't think that, and Billy Eppler, we all talked about the trade deadline last year, how it was a disaster and how he didn't do a good job. And I was one of those guys. But if you really put it into perspective, and it's not backtracking, but it is understanding the situation at hand. Was Billy Eppler was his hands were tied, right? The farm system wasn't very good. The prospects he was willing to trade, nobody wanted. Vientos, guys in that spectrum where Vientos probably wouldn't be a top 20 prospect in most good farm systems, but he was top 7 in the Mets farm system. That just tells you something about the Mets farm system prior to the deadline this year, right? They didn't want to trade Mauricio. They didn't want to trade Beatty or Alvarez or basically anybody in their top 10. And specifically their pitchers, which most people try to look for when they make trades to get prospects back, is usually pitching prospects. So that is something that is understandable when it comes to that. Again, in the moment, you're pissed off because the Mets were one of the best teams in baseball last year, and they might have needed a little bit more, another bat or maybe 2 bats and another arm or 2 in the bullpen. Maybe that would have helped us out when it came to getting guys at the deadline. But there's no mistake about it. Billy Eppler, maybe he spoke to David Stearns and worked with David Stearns during this deadline, but you have to give Billy Eppler credit for what he did at this deadline. He knew he was going to get a lot of slack from a lot of people who thought this team was going to make a run, which was laughable, right? You have to give him credit for making those deals. And I didn't think they were going to trade Verlander, but I think the only way they were going to get trade Verlander was to the Houston Astros, because that was the only team Verlander wanted to go to. And the only way the Mets were going to trade Verlander was if they got back what they wanted from the Houston Astros. And they got exactly what they wanted back, and that's been there, done that, and that ended up being the deadline move that everybody was a little more shocked about than the Scherzer and all the other trades that went down. But the most important thing is, what are the Mets going to do going forward? Again, David Stearns can't take over officially until the season is over, and that is after the World Series, which is fine. But we all know that, and I truly believe this. I think Billy Eppler and David Stearns had contact throughout the deadline, probably throughout the week or 2 before the deadline. I truly believe that. That's just me. That is just me. So it's just a matter of looking at it in 2 different perspectives. One, it shouldn't be shocking that David Stearns is the president of baseball operations for the Mets. It's been highly known that this was going to happen, though the worst kept secret in baseball for a while now. And I do think that David Stearns, with his knowledge and with his the guys that he's going to put around them, because it ain't just about him knowing stuff at the major league level as a president of baseball ops. It is also about bringing in the right guys to develop the farm system, to scout certain players, right? The Brewers, it's not like they've been picking in the top 5 of the draft the last couple of years here, right? They've been picking, 15th, 16th, 17th, like between 15 and 20 for a while now, because they have good records. They make the playoffs. So it's not like they're picking in the top 10 every single year. So he's drafting well also, and that's important, specifically pitching, which is also important for the Mets as well. So look, it's a good signing. It's a good baseball mind. He always wanted to come back to New York. He talked about it, and now he's here. Now, what do we have to do? And I saw Easy talking about, yes, the Yankees are rumored about Yamamoto, 7 years, $155 million. That's fine. I'm not worried about money or years when it comes to Yamamoto. If the Mets if Steve Cohen wants Yamamoto, he's going to overpay everybody. He's going to outbid every team. Just that simple. It's just that simple. I'm not worried about it. If the Mets want, now, again, when it comes to Shohei Ohtani, and if the Mets want to outbid everybody, that's fine. It's going to be up to Ohtani, because I still think the Mets are going to make the biggest offer to Ohtani. It's just a matter of Ohtani wants to come to the Mets. Yamamoto is going to take the most years and the most money. And you got to remember, guys, if you remember, Kodai Senga and Yamamoto, they know each other, right? They pitch together. They know each other. They pitch with Japan as well. They know each other. don't think for a second that they're not talking back and forth. Kodai Senga is one of the better pitchers in baseball over the last 3 months or so, and he's probably going to get a couple of Cy Young votes and maybe some Rookie of the Year votes as well. It's don't think for a second. Again, when it only comes to money, because you can't determine trades, but when it comes to money, if Steve Cohen wants somebody and the player wants to come here, the Mets are never going to be outbid, right? Just like the whole thing with DeGrom. The Mets didn't really want to extend DeGrom an outrageous contract, right? The same thing with Correa. Steve Cohen got excited knowing that Correa and the Giants were having problems contract-wise, and Cohen came up with a massive contract, right? And then, obviously, when they had medicals and situations like that, Cohen took a step back, right? That's understandable. But there is no doubt that, and again, I don't believe for a second the Yankees are going to spend a lot of money on anybody, to be honest with you. I think it's fool's gold. And we've heard about this for years with the Yankees. Oh, the Yankees are going to go after DeGrom. Oh, the Yankees are going to go after Correa. They're going to go after Ohtani. They're going to go after this one. They're going to go after that one. And they never do, right? Nobody had the Yankees signing Carlos Rodon. And the only reason why they signed Carlos Rodon was because the pressure was on them because they signed absolutely nobody of any significance. I don't believe that one bit, right? And remember, we're Yankee fans on this channel talking about how good their rotation was going to be, the best in baseball. How did that one work out? Garrett Cole's probably going to win the Cy Young, and the Yankees are not going to make the playoffs. Hey, Yankee fans, guess what? Welcome to Metsville, because that was Jacob deGrom. How many years in a row? Yeah. So, with that said, what is the key to David Stearns being successful this offseason, right? We all know David Stearns is going to make the final decisions. Billy Eppler is probably going to be the guy working on Yamamoto, working on the Ohtani situation. But what is David Stearns going to do? And I've said this for probably a couple of months now on the Roundtable podcast and the Shea Bridge show and just on my channel in general by myself. What did I have said? Corbin Burnes is the guy to look out for when it comes to the Brewers trading him. He's going to get traded this offseason. I feel very confident in that. He was not happy about arbitration last year, this offseason. With the Brewers, he lost the arbitration case. Thought it was a joke. Thought they could have not been involved with an arbitration hearing. Thought the Brewers were going to work with him. He was pissed off. He said it to the media. Everybody knows it. Also, which is interesting, is the fact that David Stearns, it was an advisor with the Brewers, had all the knowledge about what the Brewers are doing, and talked and actually made the phone call about Pete Alonso. So what does that also tell you? That also tells you David Stearns is a guy that isn't afraid to make a big move. I think if he can make the big move, he will make the big moves, right? He knows about Corbin Burnes. Yeah, he has a little bit of an injury concern, but I mean, he can be one of the better pitchers in baseball. And if the Mets can find a way with David Stearns at the helm to trade for Corbin Burnes, now you have Corbin Burnes and Kodai Senga as your 1 and 2, and that's a pretty damn good 1-2. And yes, they got to fill up the rotation a little bit more. You know, you're going to have Jose Quintana, who's a solid pitcher who can be easily your number 4, or possibly number 5. You find a way to you sign Yamamoto. Now you got your 1, 2, 3, and now you have the whole free agent list of pitchers that you can choose from. Right? Everybody was talking about Urias. We know that's not going to happen now with the domestic violence situation. That's a good thing, right? You know, could Mike Vasil be a part of this rotation? Possibly. You know, I would be a little worried about Yamamoto in the beginning, knowing that his innings might be a little bit, you know, with giving extra days rest. You know, but I'm telling you right now, Burnes, Senga, Yamamoto, as Chris said, CP New York Sports there, make sure you subscribe to his channel. Burnes, Senga, Yamamoto, Quintana, Vasil. Wouldn't that's a fun rotation. And again, we got so infatuated, which is understandable, with DeGrom, Scherzer last year, and now Scherzer, Verlander this year. Again, I'm like a broken record with this, guys. I know you're sick of hearing it, but listen up. Listen up. The New York Mets, going into the season, people like their rotation, right? Have we looked at the playoffs going forward in the National League right now? I mean, what rotation are you scared of? Even the Braves, that are the best team in the National League. Even the Dodgers, their pitching isn't great. I mean, they're good, a little bit above average at best. And they have a couple of pitches in their rotation, the Braves, that hasn't really pitched well in the playoffs. And they're going with a couple of young guys as well. The Dodgers, I mean, after using Urias, I mean, it's Kershaw and Buehler was supposed to come back, and now he's not. It's Kershaw and, pray for the best. That is the teams. That's what it means, right? You just see the National League isn't very good pitching-wise, starting rotation-wise. So it shows you that even the Phillies, I mean, Phillies starters last year had better seasons than they did this year. But they're performing better this year than they are last year. And yes, it is the offense. Absolutely. But it shows you that the rotation has to be good and a little bit above average to keep the teams in ball games to score runs. Because, oh, by the way, the Mets have hit more home runs this year by a large margin than they did last year. And the Mets are scoring the same amount of runs per game than they did last year. So it shows you that it's not just all about great pitching. Now, when you get to the playoffs, absolutely, you're going to need guys to step up a little bit. But let's not act like you need, 2 Cy Young Award winners and a 10-time All-Star to be in your rotation to win World Series. I mean, the Phillies made the World Series last year. Was it because of their pitching? Absolutely not. I went last year as I was fighting with people about the World Series last year between the Astros and the Phillies. One starter in 6 games went more than 6 innings. One. What does that tell you? That tells you that all you need the starters to do is keep your team in a ball game and make sure you have a solid bullpen to get the job done. Right? Let's not act like the Phillies didn't match their way to a World Series appearance. And the Astros, the same thing. The difference was that Valdez was actually dominant in basically one start. And that was a 7-inning performance. Other than that, everybody pitched 6 innings or less, and most of them pitched 5 innings or less. That is the most important thing you have to look at. Burns for Alonso straight up is a horrible idea. Absolutely. Right? It is. Like, nobody's going to do that. Obviously, I don't even think the Brewers would do that because not only they're not going to extend Burns, they're not going to pay Alonso what he's going to want. So that doesn't make sense for the Brewers. Honestly, it doesn't make sense for the Mets either, even though they can pay either one of those guys, if not both. Right? I think it's smart, and why I think the Mets are really going to look into trading. And somebody brought up, I don't know who it was. I forgot who had said it, but they said that the Brewers are not going to try to help the Mets. The one thing about the Brewers and the Mets is that they had a very good relationship over probably about an 8-9 year period about making, even if they're small trades, right? They've had good communications going back and forth. And I was, before Stearns as well. I do think that they have a good relationship. And just because the Mets are trying to get David Stearns for a couple of years now doesn't mean the Brewers were pissed off about it. The Brewers wanted him to honor his contract. That's all they wanted, right? So if the Brewers, who can't basically, give huge contracts to, a couple of players, they're not going to want it. Look, you can get more for Burns this offseason than you can at the deadline. The Mets now have a farm system that some guys are expendable now, and it's still not going to hurt your farm system, right? The Brewers, right, are going to look for best available. That's what they've done many times when they traded for prospects, a lot of the times. Easy, I was just going to bring that up. Don't think for a second that the Mets wouldn't take a bad contract of Yelich to get Burns and not give up a massive amount of prospects. That's another thing as well that you have to look at also that a lot of teams will not do. And Yelich, right, you could throw him in left field or you could throw him in right field, whatever you need to do. If you really think Mauricio is going to be a second baseman, McNeil can play left field. And or wherever you want to play Yelich, left or right, you can put McNeil in the other position, right? That's a situation as well. And I do think that a top position player for a top pitcher doesn't make sense unless you have a surplus of position players, which the Mets do not. They need more than a starter. Yeah, see, I don't believe that's true, to be honest with you. Again, Alonso is going to have 120 plus RBIs, close to 50 home runs, if not 50 home runs, and the Mets are nowhere near the playoffs, right? I'm sick and tired of people worrying about just one player when the Mets have made the World Series, the playoffs once since Pete Alonso been here. This is going on year 6 now, right? He's going to be in his 6th year where he's made the playoffs once. And it's not all about Pete Alonso. We all know that. But don't act like Pete Alonso wasn't the huge reason why the Mets had the worst June probably in their franchise, how bad they were. Pete Alonso was a big part of that, right? You can't be the face of the franchise. You can't be the guy who talks in front of the media and be the first person to speak and complain about a deadline and be the guy that wants to be the center of attention and wants to be loved by fans and not show up when your team needed you most, right? When your team is struggling, you look for the best player on your team to pick up your team and put them on their shoulders. Pete Alonso in June, let's be honest, from May 1st all the way until almost the end of June, he was basically batting under 200, all right? And wasn't hitting a lot of home runs either. So, I just don't understand why people are going crazy. Like, if Pete Alonso's not on his team, the Mets are done. Why? Right? Tampa Bay gets rid of their players all the time. Right? The Astros get rid of Correa, get rid of Springer. They have an assembly line of prospects coming up. They just won the World Series yesterday with Pena being the World Series MVP. Right? The Braves didn't sign Freddie Freeman, and they're better off now than they were. So I just don't understand that. No, CD it is, because those 40 home runs and 120 RBIs were a lot of those were after the trade deadline too, right? People remember when Lindor started to get hot in 2021, basically when the Mets were out of it, basically post All-Star break, everybody's like, oh, he's just padding his stats. Oh, he's hitting home runs and getting RBIs when they don't matter. But we don't say that about Pete Alonso when he's done that as well. That's not fair. Why? Because Pete Alonso's homegrown? That's why we can't talk about that? Or I'm going to talk about that, and I can care less if anybody else doesn't talk about that. Why? Everybody's too scared to talk about that? I'm not, right? Pete Alonso this year was one of the problems when the Mets still had a chance to make some noise to make the playoffs. He was part of that. Yes, Lindor was part of that. But you know what? Lindor actually got his average up to 250 when it was lower than Pete Alonso's, right? Pete Alonso's still hovering around 220 here, all right? And listen, he's a 250 career hitter. I'm not going to kill him for just one season. But this goes back a couple of years now, right? I appreciate what Pete Alonso has done. He's been, great with the fans, great with hospitality and charities and everything like that. I don't care what he does off the field. You can be the biggest asshole known to man. Perform on the field. And again, there's a lot of guys. Yeah, absolutely. I want to build the team around Pete Alonso. But let's not also pull the wool over our eyes here and not call the facts, right? Pete Alonso has been a part of this team since 2019, right? If he's the face of the franchise, at some point, you got to stop blaming the guy who is the most important guy on this team, right? When the team was struggling, your best player needs to step it up. You can't just fold just like the rest of the team. You can't do that. It's just that simple. Christian, exactly. And it wasn't because of the wrist injury. The wrist injury was well after his terrible May and June. Right? Didn't he get hit like late June? From May 1st until he got hit on the wrist, he was batting under 200 and scarcity with his home runs. He had a great April, a really good July, a really excellent August, and a very good September so far. May and June matters, guys. We forget about that, but June was the biggest reason why the Mets had no shot to get back into this race. And Alonso was a part of that. And if you're going to kill Lindor because of the contract, you got to kill Pete Alonso as well, who is looking for $30+ million, because that's the big reason why the Mets haven't signed him yet, because Pete Alonso is probably asking for the moon and the stars. At some point, you got to be a winner, right? Derek Jeter didn't get a massive contract from the Yankees because he was the best shortstops in baseball. He wasn't. You know why? He was a winner when it mattered. When the team wasn't doing well, Jeter stepped up. The playoffs, when the team wasn't doing anything, who was the guy you always wanted at the plate? Derek Jeter. Pete Alonso has to start being that guy. Pete Alonso needed to be the best player in June when the team was struggling. You can't be the best player in April and the best player in August when your team's already out of it. It makes no sense. At some point, the numbers matter, but look when the numbers matter. Right? I go over this all the time. Francisco Lindor, who people love to kill, and he's going to be disliked just like Carlos Beltran was. And once Lindor career's over, and whatever the Mets do, win championship or not win a championship, Lindor's going to have very good numbers probably through most of his career as a Met. And people are going to he's going to be looked at as a very good, if not a really great Met, a really good Met after his Mets career is over, once he's not a Met anymore. The same thing with Carlos Beltran. Nobody could stand Carlos Beltran. Nobody appreciated him when he was wearing the orange and blue until after he retired and after everything went down. Now Met fans like to talk to him like he was the best player ever. No, CD, he's not. But let's not act like every time Jeter was up in a big spot, specifically in the playoffs, it seemed like he always got it done. And that's that's the reason why he's in the Hall of Fame. The reason why he has, he's beloved by Yankee fans is because not because he never won an MVP, never had a great season, numbers wise, never had the big home run totals. His average was always very good, never the big RBI totals. That's not a Hall of Famer. He's a Hall of Famer because what he did into the playoffs and his 3,000 hits. And a very good shortstop. Yeah, and that is the whole point when it comes to Pete Alonso. Look, I love Pete Alonso. Like, there's not a guy that I wouldn't want representing my team than Pete Alonso. But at some point, what is on the field matters. And you can look at numbers all you want. I'm sorry. The 2 months that mattered the most, and the big reason why the Mets made that decision at the deadline was because Pete Alonso was one of many. But if you're going to be the face of the franchise, you get the blame for this debacle. You do. Sorry. Right? People couldn't wait to kill Francisco Lindor in 2021. It's all his fault. Right? When Pete Alonso had a bad year as well. Right? Pete Alonso, I'm not going to kill Pete Alonso on the average this year. I mean, it is eye-opening a little bit. But in his career, so I'm not going to kill him on that. He's a 250 hitter. But we kill Lindor about padding his stats when Alonso's doing the exact same thing. Why isn't that fair? And it makes no sense to me. And oh, by the way, Lindor has better clutch numbers than Pete Alonso, if anybody cares about that. And that's not even a point. The fact of the matter is, Pete Alonso is not signed yet, is because Pete Alonso and his agent is probably asking for an astronomical amount of years and money. Pete Alonso thinks he's he said it many times. He thinks he's one of the best power hitters in baseball, which it's hard to argue that. But I'm sorry, you're not getting $300 million a year or $35+ million a year for just hitting home runs. There's more to it. Aaron Judge got that money because he's one of the better defensive outfielders in baseball. He is the best hitter when healthy. That's a big key. And he's a 300 hitter. Pete Alonso is none of those. Pete Alonso has become a better. Here's the problem with Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso wasn't a very good first baseman coming up. He worked on it and got better. So it looks like it's so much better, but he's been good, really good. But it's not at the level. Again, Pete Alonso still makes bonehead plays at first base, where I still think he goes too far out to get balls that a second baseman should get, or just it's a little sloppy at times. But you can't argue that he's worked and got better. That's understandable. He's never going to hit 300. He's a 250 career hitter. Now, you hit 45 home runs a year, it's nice, but when do you hit those 45 home runs a year? Right? That also matters. And I think too many people, that's why I always talk about Aaron Judge. Well, great. American League home run record, great seasons, but when you're in the playoffs, you're batting 200 and you don't help your team win. When you're a Yankee and postseason matters, that's if he never does well in the postseason and the Yankees don't win a championship with Judge, that's going to be a big problem with Yankee fans and baseball in general about Judge. Pete Alonso, you have to start looking in the same way, right? If Pete Alonso wants that much money in that many years, like Aaron Judge, like $300+ million for 9 years, well, guess what? What have you shown us? You've had one playoff appearance with your team. You've been the face of the franchise, even though I would say DeGrom was the face of the franchise for a couple of years prior to Pete Alonso being the face of the franchise, right? But some consider Pete Alonso the face of the franchise. Well, okay, he's been on since 2019. One playoff appearance in 5 years, going on his 6th year next year. You better make the playoffs, and you better do well. Pete Alonso wasn't very good in the 3 games against the Padres. Nobody was. But again, when you're the face of the franchise, you have to step it up. You have to put the team on your shoulders. At some point in September, Pete Alonso was good average-wise, but wasn't very good everywhere else in the department where you need him, such as home runs and run production. Right? We saw this last year. Marte went down, and it seemed like the lineup forgot how to hit. Well, Pete Alonso, you're a prolific power hitter. You're the face of the franchise. Why couldn't you step up? And it goes back to the same thing. It goes back to the same thing again and again and again. Again, the Mets franchise didn't fold and move to Charlotte, North Carolina once they traded Tom Seaver. There was Met fans that said, I'd never be a Met fan again, but a lot of them came back, right? The Mets won after Tom Seaver left, right? They made the World Series in 73, right? I know Tom Seaver was there, but still, it goes back to the same thing. Just because you're a fan favorite and fans will consider you face of the franchise does not mean that it will be the end of the world if Pete Alonso is not on this team, right? We talk about this all the time. And I truly believe, and the problem with today's fans, and I think the younger generation, and you hear it, you hear the younger generation. It's a lot of the fans, the players, or the fans that, only care about players and not really the team. Yeah, if the team wins, great, but I want to see the stats for the players. Like I talk about the NBA, where fans of the NBA nowadays are not fans of teams, they're fans of players. And again, I have a friend that is a huge Kevin Durant fan. He gets every jersey that Kevin Durant is on. Every team that he's on, he gets his jersey because he's a huge Kevin Durant fan, but his loyalty is to Kevin Durant and not a team. I think a problem with a lot of fans nowadays, probably anybody from I would say 18 and younger, are more fans of a player than they are a team. And I think when you hear people talking about, oh, if you have Alonso, I won't be a fan anymore. Well, you probably never were. If you're not a diehard and you care about the name on the back, then the name on the back of the jersey, then the front of the jersey, you were never really a fan of that team. That's the way I see it. I root for every player that is a Met. I don't care who you are, how you got there, what you said, charitable or not, on the field or off the field. I don't care. I root for the team, the name on the front of the jersey. I can care less who's on the back. If you help me win, I can care less. It's just that simple. Why do we root for Scherzer? Scherzer beat us up for years with the Nationals. One game is against us with the Dodgers. Why do we root for Scherzer? Why did I buy a Scherzer jersey? Why did people love Scherzer when he signed with the Mets? You know why? Because he would help us win. Nobody really talked about, Scherzer, Nationals, Cy Young, beat us almost every single time we faced them. No hitter in 2015. Right? We act like, if this player is not on the team, it's the end of the world. No, the Mets will still be here. Citi Field will still be here. The jerseys will most likely be the same. At some point, the players have to win. Right? Don't think for a second Steve Cohen, Billy Eppler, and David Stearns is going to go in there. Wow, you got great numbers. But what have you won, Pete Alonso? Right? Great players, franchise players, which a lot of people put Pete Alonso as. I can care less what you do. If you have the Mets all-time home run record and all types of records you beat as a Met, that's great. But Darryl Strawberry, Doc Gooden, Keith Hernandez, those guys are legendary because they won. If the Mets would have never won in 86, you think we would honor retired Doc and Gooden's number? Doc and Strawberry's number? Probably not. Winning matters. I can care less who's the player on these teams. Whoever the 26-man roster is, I don't care. Did they win? Because that's all that should matter. And if you don't believe that, then you're probably not truly a fan of that team. Just that simple. Well, Vanilla, I wouldn't say Pete Alonso is a Mauve 1. I get the comparison, but again, look, Pete Alonso is going next year into year 6. Look, I tell you this. I don't believe the Mets are going to extend Pete Alonso this offseason. And I don't think they should. To be honest, how bad would it have been if the Mets would have gave Michael Conforto $100 million and he would have took it? How bad that contract would have looked. Right? I truly believe, and again, we can talk about all you want about the numbers that Pete Alonso puts up, but the same way a lot of people killed Lindor for padding his stats, Pete Alonso did the same thing, right? Right? April games matter, September games matters, June matters, all the games matter, right? But we all believe, I think we can all agree on this, that June was the big reason why the Mets could not make a run and why they made the decision at the trade deadline or around the week of the trade deadline to make the decision they made. June was the big reason. They couldn't catch pop-ups. They couldn't turn double plays. They couldn't hit. They couldn't pitch. Everything. If you're the franchise player, if you're the face of the franchise, some point you have to step up and dominate when your team is struggling. It's just that simple. Great players do that. Not just great Mets. I can care less if you're a great Met. That's nice. But let's not act like the Mets organization has had, MVPs rolling through their system year after year after year, where the numbers that the Mets have aren't that spectacular. And Pete Alonso is, going to pass a lot of these records where they're probably not even top 5, top 7 in baseball. Like, let's be easy about that. I'm not going to stream tonight, most likely. I'll do a pregame at 6:30, but that's about it. I can't stream the game tonight. I just came back from Minnesota, as you guys know. Yeah, Jay, I said that. He was in 73. But listen, I just came back from Minnesota, so I go back to work tomorrow. So I gotta be ready to go back to work. So as you guys know, I was in Minnesota Friday, and I came back yesterday. Again, the Mets do what the Mets do best: find ways to lose, which they did. It's just very simple. It was a good time. It was fun. There was Twins fans coming up to a lot of us and saying, "Can't believe that you guys stuck around for this disaster." And we give you guys a lot of credit to support your team when your team's out of it. Like, we showed up, right? I think it was about 850 of us, close to, there was, those tickets went on sale in June, when the Mets were basically out of it. So to have that many people go there and spend their hard-earned money to root on a team and have a good time at a baseball game, it was fun. I tell you that. It was pretty cool. And by the way, guys, Target Field, if you ever think about going there, go there. It's an excellent ballpark. Food is amazing. The surrounding area of the ballpark is awesome. You can walk around the entire stadium outside. They got stores. They got restaurants. It's just really good. Excellent. They got banners. They got statues. They got everything about Twins history all around the ballpark. Absolutely amazing. Check out Target Field if you get a chance. Listen, it is what it is this year. It's not what we were expecting, not what we want, but you have to look about going forward. David Stearns is coming in with a mindset, a new voice, a new understanding, a guy that knows how to scout, knows who to hire. The Brewers have been very good with scouting and drafting over the years, specifically pitching in general. David Stearns is coming into this organization with a top 5 farm system, a team that should be better than what they were. And I think they have more of the core here for David Stearns, where David Stearns is not coming into a complete, utter disaster when you look at a lineup, right? You know, with Alonso, McNeil, Nimmo, Lindor, and not even counting the younger kids yet. That's your core that's been here for a decent amount of time already. And then you also can put in Alvarez and Mauricio. I'm not sure about Beatty, but you've put in those guys. David Stearns has to put guys around those guys. Now, again, we don't know what David Stearns is going to do, right? Everybody's in love with David Stearns, but David Stearns says, listen, I think we need to, make some big moves here and change things around because clearly something not working. And yes, we did sign David Stearns. Apparently, it's a 5-year deal. So, which is, I like that 5-year deal, to be honest with you. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm getting a ton of messages here. I'm sorry, guys. So that's where it is right now if you're the Mets, right? We all like the David Stearns signing. But don't get mad if he does stuff that you're not going to like. Because it's a new voice, a new look, new eyes on the franchise here. Just because you think Pete Alonso is a franchise player doesn't mean he thinks he's a franchise player or a winning player or a guy that can take a team on his shoulders and take them to the promised land. Right? Great players can be great players. And yes, you got to put a team around them. But for a lot of people, for the last 2 years, thought the Mets were a very good team. Well, at some point, you got to start blaming the main players on the team. And you can't just only blame Nimmo and Lindor and guys that are not really the face of your franchise or a fan favorite much, like Pete Alonso is, or not homegrown like Lindor or like Alonso, unlike Lindor. At some point, you got to blame the guy who is the face of your franchise. And until we do that, and until we take the blinders off, and just because guys put up big numbers, when do those big numbers happen? Again, guys, this is not lying to you guys. It easily can be fact checked. Look at the May numbers and the June numbers prior to his wrist injury. Look at those numbers. And yes, Lindor was a problem. Nimmo was a problem. There were a lot of guys, Marte, all those guys were problems. But if you want to be paid like a franchise player, you want to be paid like the face of the franchise, you want to be paid because you believe you're the best power hitter in baseball, which there's more to it than just hitting home runs. At some point, you got to put the team on your shoulders. In June, the Mets needed a guy to step up, put them on their shoulders and says, hey guys, I'll help you guys out. I'll take this. Let's go. Not let it spiral out of control like the team did. And Pete Alonso, you're the face of the franchise. Hello. You got to be that guy. And he wasn't, along with others, but at some point, the face of the franchise got to start taking some blame here, guys. Yeah, well, CD, you know why I'm scapegoating one guy? Because you and many others were scapegoating Francisco Lindor in 2021. And every other year, basically. For the last 3 seasons, everybody was scapegoating Francisco Lindor because of his contract. But you know when things are going to change? Just like Yankee fans are turning on Judge a little bit. You get that big contract, you better deliver. And it's not just the numbers that you put up at the end of the year. It's stepping up in the big moments. It's stepping up when your team needs you. That's fine, CD. But again, I can replace 40 and 120 with 2 guys. You can do that. You got to understand, guys, you scapegoat certain players. And then when you scapegoat the guy that everybody likes, it's a problem. But don't act like Pete Alonso wasn't a big reason why the Mets fell apart in June. He was part of that. What, we're not going to give no blame to Pete Alonso, but give blame to everybody else? That's not fair. That is stupid. Pete Alonso is a part of this team. He wants to be the face of the franchise, right? He talks about being the best power hitter in baseball. He talks about working on his defense. He got better, absolutely. But when your team needed you most, you batted under 200. And your worst home run month was June. That month matters just as much as September doesn't for the Mets right now. Or August, for that matter. Pete Alonso had a great August. You know how everybody on Twitter, as soon as he hits a home run, oh, you got to pay that guy. Well, I mean, why do those home runs count? Do they matter? No. Mets ain't doing nothing with that numbers. No, Fuego, I'm not only blaming Pete, but he's the one that's looking to get a major contract. If tomorrow comes out, the Mets give 9 years, $300 million to Pete Alonso, what are you going to be happy about that? That's not a good number. And again, the way Yankee fans, CD, I can find a lot of guys that can hit 20 home runs, and all they have to do is hit 60, 70 RBIs apiece. And that's more than Pete Alonso, one guy. You know what that does? If Pete Alonso streaks and is struggling that month, now you have 2 other guys that one could be struggling and the other one could be performing. The problem is, when you needed Pete Alonso the most as your franchise player, as the face of the franchise, the guy who you need to put the team on your shoulders, he doesn't. He didn't. That was June. From May 1st to almost the end of June, right before he got hit on the wrist, because I'm not going to kill him for getting hit on the wrist and coming back and struggling. That's an injury. That's understandable. But from May all the way until almost the end of June, he batted less than 200 for the majority of it and barely over 200. This is not saying to trade Pete Alonso. This is saying don't give him a stupid contract. That's what I'm saying. But at some point, everybody likes to blame everybody else. Everybody likes to blame everybody else. Everybody. Well, CD, tell me something. There's been great players on teams that never won nothing, right? Is it all their fault? And again, it's not blaming Pete Alonso. There's other guys to blame. Absolutely. But again, everybody's afraid to pick on Pete Alonso. Why? I just don't understand it. Stop making everything like Pete Alonso's not part of the problem. He is. Okay, sorry, 205. He was terrible from May 1st until almost the end of June. Check it out. Look at the stats. What was he batting? 215? Great. But you know what I did see? Francisco Lindor get his average up to 250, where Pete Alonso's still hovering around 220. My biggest problem is that people don't like to blame people that are getting the biggest praise when things are going well. When things are going great last year, Pete Alonso, Pete Alonso, Pete Alonso. It's got to be Pete Alonso. When things are going bad, Lindor, Marte, Escobar. Even Nimmo didn't even get a lot of blame for a while. Right? If you're going to be the face of the franchise, you got to put this team on your back. Not in August when we decide to trade off pieces and there was no hope of a run. Not in September when nobody cares. It's always great to start off good in April, but you were a disaster the 2 biggest months where the Mets had a chance. Remember, guys, June 1st, the Mets were a couple of games out of a division. They were in a wild card spot. That changed quickly. And that was in May where Pete Alonso was struggling. And then June, it turned into not just the Pete Alonso struggling, but everybody struggling. And again, this is a team effort. We all know that. Yeah, Jay, but you know why they were raked at about with the clubhouse stuff too? Like, can we be honest about the media here? The media had no story to talk about after the deadline. Right? What were you going to talk about with the Mets? Nobody cared after that. So the media needed something to rile things up. And I truly believe that it wasn't leaked out by a Met or executive or an agent or another team. That was the media trying to find stories, because most of these stories came out from where? It came out slowly from the Mets beat reporters who are covering the team on a daily basis. And then it went to national reporters that were covering the Mets. When you have nothing to talk about, what's there to talk about? Negative things. That's what piques interest and clicks that the reporters get. That's what it is. And then the players came out and defended Pete Alonso. So it's like, come on. Yes, CD, yes. I am blaming Trout and Ohtani. Yes, because you know what? Trout, maybe if he wasn't hurt for the majority of this year and the years ago, maybe they could have been a little bit better. It's a lot easier to pitch around Ohtani and pitch to Ohtani when Trout's not there. But Jay, they don't want to blame Pete. You blame Pete, you get I'm telling you right now, tweet this. Pete Alonso is one of the problems with the Mets. Hashtag the Mets, hashtag Mets Twitter, hashtag LGM. Guarantee you will get people killing you because you said something bad about Pete Alonso. Brian, you can leave. I'm not here to continue to bring up new things. What's there to talk about with the Mets besides Pete Alonso, president of baseball ops that just got signed, and what else? The offseason is pointless to talk about yet, which I already spoke about. Maybe you came in late, but that's fine. Yeah, but CD, again, I'm not talking I didn't say Pete Alonso is the only problem. But we were quick to blame Lindor. We were even quick to blame Nimmo for a little while. And everybody else. Oh, it's Marte's fault. It's Escobar's fault. It's Navarez's fault. It's Nito's fault. CD? No, but your girl does. Probably hot for me too. Listen, guys, the fact of the matter is, you have to look at, you have to take a step back. And again, I always talk about this. Take the emotion out of it. David Stearns has no emotional connection to Pete Alonso or for anybody else on the Mets team, on their roster. He has to come in and look at it from an outside perspective. That's the problem that a lot of us have, including myself. I'm not just throwing you guys in there. I'm throwing myself in there as well. We get blinded sometimes because of the love of a player, the love of our team. Right? There were still Met fans before the deadline or after the deadline that were crying bloody murder. Like the worst thing the Mets could have done was trade guys at the deadline because they thought they were going to make a run when there was no chance. at all. Oh, by the way, where's all the Met fans that was talking about Scherzer and how good he was? That changed really quickly when he actually faced a really good team, right? The big game against the Astros where Texas needs to start winning, Scherzer is gone by the third inning, gives up 7 runs, couple of bombs. Remember that. Oh, and by the way, a dead arm again. Forearm issues. Oh, how about that? So, Metro, that's a good point. Is Buck going to be back next year? That's a tough question, to be honest. Let's see. In my opinion, yeah. But, again, David Stearns, as an outside perspective, might see things differently. Might want a younger guy. Might want a guy who's on the same level analytically as himself, right? Clearly, the Mets can't figure out analytics, or the players can't figure out the analytics. And we just hired a president of baseball ops who is heavily involved with analytics. So is it the way they're communicating the analytics? Because I always go back to fuck analytics. I just don't understand how players who always talk nonsense and every time something goes wrong, they don't blame themselves, they blame everybody else. I just don't understand. If you're Pete Alonso, if you're Brandon Nimmo, who had a great year last year and got you that big contract because of your year last year, why would you listen to anybody that tells you anything different that you did last year? Yeah, you can listen to it, but don't take it to the plate. Do what made you get that big contract. And that goes for many of the Mets players. Are you that soft? Are you that mentally soft or that naive that you can't throw that garbage away and use the information that gave you a really good season last year and not take it into this year? It's so stupid. We're quick to blame the coaches and quick to blame the analytics when all the teams get the same information, use the same shit. Some teams are better than others, but maybe some players are not actually using a lot of the analytics they were given. That's up to the players too. So I do think, yeah, I heard about Council probably going to take a year off, which in that situation, it kind of works out, right? Aaron Boone went to the booth, Buck Showalter started TV, and they all became managers, right? A lot of the coaches now have. Would I be shocked if Buck Showalter remains the manager for one more year and lives out his contract? Yes. But I think he would be on a hot seat very quickly. Things don't work out in the first couple of months, he might get fired. Again, if you want to blame everybody, you can blame everybody, right? A lot of people thought that Buck Showalter was the biggest problem. And if they fired Buck, the team was going to be better. Sorry. It's hard to make Lindor, bet 220 for 2.5 months, and Alonso bet 220 for the season, or blame everybody else. Marte was hurt and clearly didn't tell anybody until recently. You can't have Escobar hit. Nimmo started the streak after April. Everything is not just about the manager, right? Managers do less now than they ever done. So I do think Buck is going to be back one more year. It's not going to be a popular decision, but if David Stearns doesn't get the guy that he wants, and maybe he really does want Craig Counsell. If Counsell's going to take a year off, are you just going to fire Buck for one bad season and one really good season? I mean, come on. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you just going to, nobody's going to take a managerial job for 1 year, knowing that they're probably going to fire you after that. So and Metro, it's a good point. Is David Stearns really going to talk to Buck and say, hey, listen, the kids need to play next year? If these guys are going to be your starters or going to be a big part of your team, you got to start them. Obviously, Alvarez is going to get day games after night games and stuff like that. Probably play 5 days a week or so, maybe sometimes 4 days a week, depending on the schedule. We'll see. But that's why if David Stearns is all hell bent on bringing in Craig Counsell as the manager, and Counsell says he wants to take a year off, who's going to take that managerial job for 1 year, knowing that that's going to happen? Nobody. So why fire Buck just to fire Buck to bring in a guy who's dead man and walk in who can care less if the Mets win or lose? Because he's going to be fired anyway, right? So it might be better off to keep Buck in his last year of his deal and just keep a short leash on him. We'll see. So with that said, David Stearns gets a 5-year deal from the Mets to be the president of baseball operations. He doesn't officially start until the season is over after the World Series, but we all know that discussions and conversations are happening just like they were prior to August 1st when the Mets were allowed to speak to David Stearns. Was probably happening way before that. So with that said, guys, we got our president of baseball operations. Steve Cohen got his guy. Now let's see what happens. Let's play out the rest of the string, the last couple of games of the season. Let's get into the playoffs. As long as the Braves don't win and the Phillies don't win, I'll be happy. And, of course, I'll do a couple of pre-games. Actually, I'm going to think about doing a pre-game at 6. We'll see. I'll let you guys know. But we got our president of baseball operations. Can't really do much now until the offseason. We'll see what happens. But a lot of big decisions. Starting pitching, bullpen, coaching staff, scouting, minor league development. All that is going to be on David Stearns. And we'll see what he's going to do as the next president of baseball operations. With that said, guys, everybody have a great rest of your Tuesday. And by the way, guys, just so I go, obviously yesterday was 9/11. I just want to say if you, some people might not have been born, but most of us were. Prayers to all the families that lost someone on that day. And I remember I was in high school, first year in high school when that happened. It was insane. Again, for all the heroes, the fire department, NYPD, Port Authority, U.S. Marshals, military, everybody who tried to help and risked their lives on that day and didn't come out alive, and even people that are scarred for life who actually got out of there. I'm scarred, and I was in Queens at that time in high school. So never forget, guys, 22 years later, I can't believe that. I can't believe how long it's been. So we pray for all the families who lost someone on that day. The first responders, obviously, nobody could do what you do in the bravery that you guys had to deal with that day and for the rest of your lives. So with that said, guys, everybody have a great night. Let's go Mets. David Stearns, president of baseball operations, 5-year deal. Let's run out the string. I'll see you next time, guys. Let's go Mets. Have a great night.
Of New York town. Give them a yell, give them a hand, and let them know you're rooting in the stand. Come on and meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets.